So this morning, we're going to try to unravel the regulatory changes that are affecting the UK and France and Europe for travel and trade requirements. So to set the scene, we've imagined a case study that will allow the speakers to explain and recommend certain requirements. So in our case study, we have a company called Link Energy. Link Energy is an international cable supplier. It's a family business that was started in 1952 in Wales, and they're working on renewable energy projects, both in France and the UK. They have offices in the UK, in France, and in the Netherlands, with over 200 employees, around 50 of who travel frequently between UK and Europe. Their three-phase high-voltage electrical cables are manufactured in Wales and then exported to the EU, while the insulators are manufactured in the Netherlands and exported within the EU and to the UK. So to kick off, I would like to ask Kassem, perhaps you could start by explaining briefly what we have learned over the past 4 years since the EU exit.
Yeah, thank you, Fiona. Here, around these 4 years, what we have learned, normally there is two kind of controls stepping today. The first type of control is a border controls, and the second type of controls, an import and export customs controls. At the beginning, I want to say at that time, this is no more free good movement between EU and GB, and also between GB and EU. The seller must, it becomes exporter, and the buyer, it becomes also importer. And both are obliged to realize customs declaration and to be under customs controls on the borders. As I saw, there is two type of controls. For border controls, this is linked to the haulier, or this is the responsibility of the haulier. Now, if we are exceeding EU with UK entrance, this exit or entrance have to be shown with GMR, which is linked to movement traceability control, and this is submitted to GB authorities. Also, we have to provide with the ELO, with the coming ELO. The ELO is not mandatory for the moment, but it's coming in normally in the month of May, and with the period, it will be totally mandatory in the month of September. Nothing that the ELO is very
Kasim, I'm just interrupting you because we've got a little bit of a problem with the micro. I don't know if you've got some noise around you, but we're having a little bit of a problem hearing you.
okay. No, it's
That's better. Thank you.
okay. Then, if I'm continuing in this way, when we have an exit from EU with UK entrance, we have to show the movements by a movement traceability control, which is a GMR declarations submitted to GB authorities. Also, we have to show it with the ELO, which is coming in month of May for test period and will be definitely mandatory in month of September. This is also movement traceability control. It's belonging to French authorities. Okay, and this is truly linked to the smart border. If you are not using a smart border, like using a tunnel or using the ferry, you are not obliged to go with ELO. And let's say the other formality, which is very important and already enter in line, is production of UNS safety and security control, or summary safety and security declaration. It is summary declaration because it's directly linked, or the responsibility of the haulier or the carrier. He have to declare what he's transporting consignment by consignment. It means consignee and consignor. Okay, and this ENS is manifesting the good entrance in GB territory and to be submitted to GB authority via Safety and Security System GB, and it was mandatory from 31 of January this year. Now, exit from GB with EU entrance must be shown with GMRB. It's linked to the movement traceability control. It's like the other GMR, submitted to GB authorities, and also the ELO B, movement traceability control, submitted to French authorities. And let's say entrance to EU, it's also linked or to have to be shown with summary entry declaration ENS, and have to be issued also to manifest the good interest in GB territory and to be submitted to EU authorities via ICS2. ICS2 is online from 1st of April this year under the test, and will be finally mandatory in month of September. Nothing that ICS2 is the evolution of ICS1, because making ENS entry to EU, it's already in the ground under the version of ICS1.
So it's quite a lot of information that you're giving to us
sure.
there. I
But
think we're
important
going to go
information.
into the detail further along and
Yeah.
explain further what the requirements are going to be. Valerie, what are you at RM Boulanger seeing with your clients right now?
Yeah, as we can see indeed that a lot of companies seems to be lost in all these regulations and also what to do. Some are have tried things to set up companies, for example, in EU, or they thought that there was a requirement to be able to trade in EU. Some were trying just to go to customs, but got stuck. Some had their customers taking the custom side of the things because they couldn't know how to handle this. There are some facts today. All the B2B transactions, the movement of the goods between EU and UK, UK and EU, there is a border now. That's a fact. So there are not anymore any intra-EU transactions, but they are related by customs regulations. It's an import, it's an export. So they face also import customs duties that needs to be paid upon clearance. They face also the import VAT that needs to be paid upon clearance of the goods. So that's the facts today they need to face. And there are some setup they need to put in place to be able to trade. I would not say it's easy. For me, it's easy because it's my everyday life, I would say. But there are really things, I would say simple things that you need to set up so you can continue to trade as if Brexit never happened. Another part, another element also that is important, I will see later, is the Incoterm. That's one of the things. So there are solutions to put in place into that.
Super. Kasim, for the physical transit of goods, what are the main steps?
Normally, for the transit is a regime allowed to the haulier to move goods contained in the trailer under customs. The transit from border customs post in the country of origin to the border customs point of the country of destination. This transit will be closed, reaching the country of destination once the import declaration is done.
Clear.
Okay.
So thank you. But Valerie, perhaps you can now explain a little bit about the Incoterms.
Yeah, indeed. That's one of the major points that needs to be in the reflection, because the Incoterms, there's about 10 or 15 of them. They are the ones in an agreement between a seller and a buyer that decides who is in charge of what in terms of insurance, in terms of customs clearance. And there's one I wanted to focus particularly because that's the one that will make things, particularly that needs a setup, a specific setup, is the DDP, Delivery Duty Paid. that actually means the seller is in charge of the whole flow, including the customs clearance at destination, either EU, UK, UK, EU, that's the same. And the seller then is in full control of the delivery up to his customer. And that means the customer is buying like he was buying before. He's buying in EU or he's buying in the UK, but he's not in charge of customs or anything. The seller is. This needs, of course, some setup that we'll see later in terms of customs and VAT, because it triggers tax obligations behind. But that's very key, and to know already who is in charge. And then if I am in charge, then there are some things to do.
So here, Link Energy, the seller, is going to be in charge.
Yeah, if Link Energy is choosing this, the agreement is DDP, Link Energy, the UK company who will bring the goods into EU, they will be in charge of customs. So the next point is going to be how to handle this and into which country of EU.
Thank you. Kasim, how can Link Energy streamline the customs process, minimizing the delays, and also, of course, ensuring that compliance is in place?
I want to jump on what Valerie say, because everything will be linked to the Incoterm, which is DDP in this case. And DDP, the seller, have the responsibility to do everything. What does it mean? As it's shown in this slide, the first step was the agreement between the seller and the buyer, and the agreement for the transaction, let's say, and they already defined Incoterm, which is DDP in this case. There is a lot of there is 4 principal Incoterms using in the ground, which is ex-work, FCA, DEP, and DDP. Let's say, in this case, the worst case, let's say, between a bracket is DDP. The first step is the agreement of the transaction. The second step is the preparation of the order by Beach Energy UK and get ready with compliant export paper, because the seller, who is the exporter, have the obligation to manifest his exportation by declaring the export for the customs authorities or UK customs authorities. And also the paperwork is very important. He have to issue a compliant invoice, a compliant packing list, and also he have to prove the origin of the goods. One is done. Step 3 is issuing a compliant export declaration, okay, from Beach Energy UK via his GB customs broker, okay. And the fourth step is issuing a compliant import declaration from Beach Energy France via his French customs broker, because the seller, who is Beach Energy UK, he have the responsibility to import goods to Europe. Here in this case, he's importing the good to France, okay? But after that, the haulier will load the goods in Wales. Sixth step, this haulier have the responsibility, as I said before, to deal with a border crossing formality, which is ENS, ICS2, GMR, and the ELO. After that, when the truck will crossing the border, let's say the customs authorities in France is dealing with a first control, which is a documentary customs control, okay, to decide letting the truck going directly in a green status, and here is the force of the smart border. There is no communication between the haulier and the customs authorities. Everything is done online, and if the documentary control is done and everything is under control, and here it is important to anticipate everything before. That's when you are in front of the customs, online or physically, everything is under control and you can justify anything. If customs have questioning or they suspect anything, they will run the truck under orange status, which is documentary control was not complying, and customs requests for identity or physical control, and truck will be under orange status in the parking area to be controlled by customs. First control will be identity, just looking for the stickers and looking just for the goods, let's say. And if everything is right, everything will be okay. But if customs want to go in deep control, they can open the truck and they can also unload the pallets and go through the goods to see what happened. When everything will be finalized and clearance will be done with duty payments, if any VAT postponed, let's say Valerie, we can more or further explain things about VAT, but regarding the duty, if there is a duty, the seller, which is Beach Energy UK, who is in charge of this operation, will pay. Okay, and after that, truck is free to proceed to delivery in France or whatever point in Europe.
Thank you. Very clear explanation. Valerie, I'm wondering if for Link Energy, they could optimize EU entry points.
Yeah, absolutely. That's another point key after the Incoterm, of course, when you know who is in charge of customs. In our example, Link Energy selling DDP would be in charge of customs. Then it's enter EU. And another thing that is important is to understand that each EU country has its own customs regulations. There's no harmonization around that. Of course, Incoterm is the same, but then the process, the customs process will be different whenever you're entering France, the Netherlands, Poland, or Germany. And also behind the tax obligations are specific to each country as well. In some countries, it's easier than in some others. So the entry point is key. On top of this, once the goods are cleared, whatever the country of EU, they are in free circulation within the EU on the customs perspective. That's why the entry point is very key. In our example, we take France, and actually it's a good example because France has something special. Well, geographically, it makes sense because it's just in front of the UK, so it makes sense to enter this way, of course. But also because of the Brexit, they had to put customs, like in place, and the smart border. We call it smart border because it's through the tunnel. It's the shortest way geographically and in distance, of course, but also it's a totally automated system to clear goods. And actually everything is organized up front. The driver, all the paperwork is sent digitally, and the driver receives the QR codes. He drives through the tunnel, and when he hits France, he gets 85% of the time a green light, meaning customs is done, actually. He doesn't even have to stop. And it's cleared in free circulation, and he can deliver the goods in France. He can deliver the goods. In our example, I think we need to deliver Poland. Well, he goes to Poland. Clearance is done, and he can go to Poland. He doesn't have to clear anything anymore. It's done.
Morning.
So that's really key here to and a very smooth transaction. I mean flow, and also on top of this, we were talking about customs duties and import VAT, and I think we're going to talk about it later. But France has some simplification measures as well. Here we say indeed in this flow that we have on the side, let's say UK or any country out of the EU, actually, it would be exactly the same way. Entering through France, for example, they will have the possibility to use the import VAT deferment mechanism. and not pay VAT. It's not that it's gone, it's just that it's a reverse charge mechanism reported to tax authorities. So it's just more a reporting issue that is mandatory, of course. And in France, you basically never pay import VAT. So that's also a cash flow benefit. That's another reason why France is a good entry point. But then you move the goods wherever you want, and you clear them under the standard regime 40 in this case. So that's the way goods should be then moved around the EU.
I do have a question. Would Link Energy, as a UK company, require a VAT number?
Yeah, in this case, because of the import VAT deferment mechanism that needs to be reported to tax, they need a VAT number for clearance. They need actually also a customs ID, which is a EORI number. So that's the two things they need to be set up to be able to clear the goods on their own name and in free circulation within the EU. But at the same time, once they have the VAT number, and the VAT number is for a non-resident, so they don't need to set up a company. So they remain a non-resident. The UK entity is the one selling in EU, and they have a VAT number because they have the way because they are clearing the goods. Once the goods are cleared in France, they are still the owner of the goods, and then the sale happens. So France becomes the country of dispatch within the EU and the taxable country where to report their sales via this French VAT number. So it means that with one VAT number, if we choose one entry point and then dispatch from this entry point, this country becomes the taxable country with one VAT number, in this case, one French VAT number. They can sell everywhere in EU. Everything is reported in France. So that's the setup they need, and that allows them to be in full control of their sale and delivery up to their customers.
So I see at the top here, R40, which I think you're going to briefly explain, because I think there's a mechanism that would allow, if there was an urgent delivery, to use something different.
Yeah, the custom R40 stands for Customs Regime 40. But just a number, it's just the standard customs regime. And it takes 24 hours to have a EORI number. So that's no issue with that. A VAT number takes a bit more time, a couple of weeks, sometimes months, depends on the country. In France, right now it's a couple of weeks, but it could be more. And in our example, we have Link Energy who wants to, they have a very good sale to make next week. So it's going to be complicated to have a VAT number by then. But there is here another type of customs regime that could be used, is the customs regime 42. And in this clearance, they are still the owner of the goods deal. Of course, they are still the one clearing the goods under their own name, but with the global VAT number of a limited fiscal representative. So in this case, for example, our Boulanger, we have a global VAT number that we use for this regime. And the companies are using this number to clear the goods. The customs broker is clearing the goods with our global VAT number and the EORI number of Link Energy, because they remain the ones, the importer of record in this transaction. But then there's some conditions to meet. The goods needs to be cleared in France, and immediately after the clearance, they need to leave outside France to another EU member states. So the import must be followed by an intra-EU delivery. That's very strict condition about this regime. So in our example, we could use the customs regime 42. They would have a EORI number in 24 hours. We have the global VAT number, so we can start. And yes, we could deliver Poland, for example, or Germany, or whatever country outside France. So yes, this transaction could be possible to deliver quickly. That's a a short condition solution that we that can be put in place while waiting for a VAT number, or they continue to use the regime 42. Of course, there's no limit in time. So it's just a custom regime that applies for a specific shipment. So it could be applied in, indeterminate period as well.
So before we move on to your explanation, which is going to be about the VAT deferment, Kassem, can you just give us, because I know you have this wonderful 3 pillars of customs clearance, and I think it would be helpful for everybody to know about the 3 pillars.
Yeah, for sure. I just want, before to continue Valérie argumentation, let's say anticipation is the key points. And we have to consider when we want to sell something in Europe and we are established in UK, we have to be we have to prepare a export project, let's say. And here we have to anticipate several things when we want to deal on DDP basis. For the customs clearance, the 3 pillars are classification of the goods, which means that we have to give to each good the right commodity code or harmonized system code. Harmonized system code is composed simply 10 digits, okay? 8 digits is the first, let's say, determination of the nature of the goods, and the 2 digits after the 8 are belonging to determine how percentage of duty you have to pay with this. The second pillar is the value of the goods, because here we have to declare the real value of the good, which is the value of the goods at the factory of the producing or the seller, okay, adding the value of transportation, adding the value of the insurance rates. The third pillar, and also it is very important pillar, is dealing with rules of origins, because here we must know that there is agreement between EU community and UK to not paying duty if the origin of the goods is belonging to UK, or after, if you are sending the goods from EU to UK, if the goods are origin EU, you don't have to pay any duty entrance in the UK.
Super. So, Valerie, can you explain about the import VAT deferment mechanism, or how to reclaim import VAT?
Yeah, like we say, when we clear goods, we pay duties or not, of course, if there are no duties, and import VAT. Like any VAT is refundable. So if you pay import VAT, you refund it via most of the time the VAT number. But there are some mechanisms that are even more interesting, because in terms of cash flow benefit is the, sorry, the import VAT deferment. The import VAT deferment exists also in UK. It's called the PVA, postponement VAT account. It's the same mechanism. Instead of paying to customs upon clearance of the goods and then wait to deduct this in the next month or quarter, this VAT, and recover this way, you don't have to advance this, pre-finance the import VAT. You just do a reporting mechanism under through the VAT number. And in France, this mechanism is even mandatory. So it's basically forbidden to pay import VAT to customs, because tax wants this to be reported in a VAT return. So very good, because you will never pay import VAT. It exists in some other countries, but to opt for this, it's optional, and there are some conditions to apply for it. And some other countries, it doesn't even exist. So you always pay VAT. That's why, again, the entry point within the EU is key, because this can have a cash flow issue here. So, but basically the import VAT, in our case here, Link Energy will not pay the import VAT if goods are cleared in France.
Okay, just a question from me, Valerie. Can Link Energy use their Dutch VAT number to clear the goods in France?
No, because the import process and the import VAT deferment, in our case in France, needs to be reported to French tax authorities. And like I say, every country has its own VAT regulations, VAT number, VAT rates, etc. So if you need to clear good in France, you need to have a French VAT number. The Dutch VAT number will be used to report VAT obligation in the Netherlands. So the physical flow of the goods with the Netherlands. And we always follow the physical flow of the goods to determine where the tax obligations happens. What is the country of taxation?
Thank you, Valerie, and thank you, Kassem. It's been very interesting. So now we've seen the best options for the movement of goods. We're going to move on to the movement of people and their travel requirements. Alistair, I know that you have a lot of information that's going to be particularly useful for those travelling between the UK and the EU. So my first question to you, Alistair, is everybody's hearing about ETIAS, ETA, EES, but we don't really know what they are and when are they going to be introduced and do they apply to everybody?
Sure. Lots of information, lots of acronyms as well in immigration. So just before we go into some scenarios with Link Energy, just to clear up some of the terms that you've just used, Fiona, and key dates and prices. So I'm going to start with the EES, entry and exit system. It's a digitization of borders across Europe to make it easier to track people, monitor entries, and uphold immigration law. It's not yet live. It's been muted as going live for what feels like years on end now, but we're expecting it to be live later this year. It's applicable to non-Europeans and it's applicable across the Schengen zone. And because it's just a digitization, it's not actually a change to anything. You're not applying for anything. There is no cost involved there. So that's a digitization of systems. Nothing changes insofar as people entering Europe. But you should be aware that it means that it's more likely that authorities will be able to monitor your entries and exits and ensure that rules are adhered to. Moving on to the two other systems that people have probably talked about more heavily, the ETA and the ETIAS. So they're at a simple level, they're the same thing, but one is for the UK and one is for Europe. Canada has its own equivalent, and probably the most well-known one is the ESTA scheme in the US. And that's exactly what the ETA and ETIAS are. They are pre-travel screenings for people entering the UK or the Schengen zone, plus a couple of additions there that I've mentioned in this table. ETA is already live. It went live in the UK gradually. It started with the Gulf states, non-European countries, and Europe was added to that last week. So now to enter the UK for short-term visit purposes, you would need to have an ETA, electronic travel authorization. Incidentally, those travel authorizations are £16. They started off as 10. The price was recently increased, which is slightly more, it's 100% more than the European equivalent, the ETIAS, which is €7. These are not visas. These are travel screening entry requirements before you enter the country. I mentioned that the ETA is already live for the UK. You'll not be able to enter the UK without it if you're one of those nationals that requires it. ETIAS is not yet live. It's meant to follow the digitization of the borders, and that's timetabled to be late next year, but don't hold your breath. It's been delayed many times already. It's not out of the realm that it's delayed yet again. So that's a very high-level overview of these three schemes. Digital borders, ESTA-style pre-travel screening for entry into the UK and to Europe. It will impact Europeans and British citizens as well. So important to have those documents before you travel.
So because the ETA is already in place, a Link Energy employee who's coming from the Netherlands to the UK, does that give him a right to work with an ETA?
No, absolutely not. So an ETA, it doesn't change the status with which you're entering. You're still entering as a visitor, but the so you're still having to fall under the visitor rules. The visitor rules in the UK are at best incredibly grey, and you will have to adhere to the rules and requirements that apply to all visitors, whether it's personal travel, business travel. Now, for business travel, you're not permitted to work, you're not permitted to receive payment from a UK entity. There are exceptions to that, such as reasonable expenses or board meetings, etc. But in short, you can't work. There are some exceptions, such as coming in as business meetings. My advice to clients is to assess it on a case-by-case basis, or if you have a project, look at that group of people traveling for that project, because each scenario is unique. And for some activities, such as installing software, you may be able to come in as a visitor, but for others, such as doing paid for consulting, you would not be able to come in. So yeah, it's not work permission.
Yes, definitely assessments needs to be done there. One of the largest difficulties that I think that everybody has is around the EU and UK rules. So for the EU, it's 90 days is authorized over a 180-day period. And for the UK, it's 180 days over a 365-day period. How can businesses possibly monitor personal and business travel?
It's a good question. It's one we get a lot as well at the moment, Fiona. And just to answer a question I saw pop up in the chat, which I didn't mention in my table, but the UK ETA is valid for 2 years, or the duration of your passport, whichever the shorter. ETIAS is slightly longer, it's 3 years, or the duration of your passport. So again, really important to be aware, if you're an employer, to be aware of these things. If you need someone to travel urgently for business, by urgently I mean tomorrow, and their ETA is no longer valid, then it's something to be mindful of. Just going back to your point about
just before you move on, because it's on the
Sure.
ETA, one quick question has also come up. How long in advance does one need to apply for an ETA? Is it sort of automatic? You're boarding the Eurostar and you can do it, or it has to be done a couple of days ahead?
Ideally do it in advance. So I just applied for 2 last week. One was approved within the hour, and the other took a few days.
Okay, so
yeah,
better to give some time.
Yeah, give some time. So on the topic of days that are permitted in the zone, or in the UK or in the Schengen zone, incredibly complex. Lots of things to think about, but here I've listed out a few things that in particular businesses should be aware of. So firstly, let's just tick off the time that you're allowed in either or when you're entering as a visitor. So Schengen, 90 in any 180 days. UK, the unwritten amount is 180 in any 365 days. I say unwritten because the rule is that you should not make the UK your permanent home. And that's largely how it's looked upon, as 180 days in any 365. Now, people will come to me and they'll say, well, I've spent 90 days and it's now the 1st of January, so I reset my clock. That's not the case. It's a rolling period. There is no refresh date. It's 90 days in any 180-day period. So if you spend the first 90 in the first 180 days, it doesn't refresh at that 180 days ticks over. It's continuously rolling. And all days count, as you alluded to, Fiona. Incredibly difficult for employers, because if you're this is a very common scenario, you're a salesperson for Link Energy and you're spending a lot of time in either jurisdiction, and you're doing so because sales activities are permitted as a visitor, but you also like 2 weeks in Spain with your family on holiday in the summer, and maybe you've got a cousin in Austria that you go and visit at Easter. All of these days will count towards those thresholds. The rules do not distinguish between personal and business. Now, as an employer, I'm sure many people on this call would have nightmares about asking people what they're doing during their annual leave. Does an employer have any right to ask those questions about how people spend their annual leave? I don't think so. So again, it's baking that into policies and awareness for employers to know that people do have personal lives. They may be spending 3 weeks in Europe, and therefore you can't use up the full 90 days that a British citizen can spend in Europe in any half year. A few other points I just like to raise are that flight delays. If you end up spending an extra week in Europe because of a cancelled flight, or you've got an emergency, funerals and weddings are the two things that people seem to dash off at short notice for. They all count towards the days. There is no discretion there. Immigration authorities do not allow for flight delays. And as I alluded to, it's this tracking of it and building in flexibility to account for those delays that will ensure that you have a robust program as a business, but also as an individual. You'll be able to go on that holiday in the summer and keep your family happy because you weren't at road shows in Berlin the week before, for example. And lots of this can be managed using an online tool. So I've linked to one there, but it's very simple. You just plug your dates in and keep track of it that way. Excuse me. But we've talked about the days. Just because you're sticking within the time thresholds doesn't mean you can do as you wish. And I think that's something that we're going to go on to now.
Right. So what are the main questions that any company should have in mind when an employee is on business travel, as people call it, so that remains compliant?
So the first thing I would, these are my answers here, Fiona. So the first thing I would always ask, Link Energy HR, it's often HR, possibly legal, come to me. So we're sending somebody to the UK for business purposes. Alistair, can we do it with a work visa, or should we send them as a visitor? Normally it's not phrased like that. Normally it's more, we're sending them as a visitor. Is that okay? Please condone it. So the first question is activities. What are they doing? And we mentioned this already, that work, in very large inverted commas, is prohibited, but meetings are permitted. But a meeting's not work. You can see how it's very grey. So my first question is, what are they doing? The actual tasks. Tell me exactly what they're doing. And immediately from that, I normally follow up with, well, how long are they doing those activities for? So I've got those thresholds in mind, but I've also got the context of what they are doing. And so Link Energy say to me that they're coming over for a team building meeting. That's fine. That's a permitted activity. And they then tell me that they're coming to the UK to do a team building meeting for 3 months.
No, that's not okay.
Yeah, I suspect that you may be doing some work. So it's not just, don't just take those thresholds. I think I put it on the previous slide as carte blanche. It's the context of the wider trip and what people are doing, how long they're doing it for. I then ask about the frequency of entry to the UK. I'm using the UK here, but same principles apply into Europe, into the UK. So frequency of visits is important. It's become less important with the use of e-gates, but it's still relevant because it's a chance for, I've used the word interception here, but it's a chance for a border officer to question you. And when you've come off a flight, maybe it's an early morning flight, it wouldn't be that long from Europe, but perhaps you're flying in from an office in South Africa, for instance, and you say the wrong thing. You're stopped and you say the wrong thing. You are coming in for meetings, but that's great. You say you're coming in for work. And what will happen? Well, sometimes you'll be turned away and said, no, we think you're working, go home and get a work visa. And the frequency of your visit heightens the chance of that happening. You're coming in frequently, you're more likely to be stopped, asked a question, and turned away.
I think we all see that. Anybody who's traveling Eurostar, we certainly see that.
Yeah. We've had over the years, I use that example of South Africa because it's a real life example. We've had people flying in, a lawyer, a partner in a law firm, stepped off the plane, was a genuine visitor, but after 12 hours flying from South Africa, was very tired and just said, oh, I'm coming in for some work. And they were turned away. And it's something we're seeing increased scrutiny of as well, particularly with change of government. Other applications that are pending, this is quite common. People will have had a work secondment to the UK. They've been here for 2 years. The work secondment is now finished. They're repatriated to their home country, but they still need to come back in for meetings. They need to just sort of finish the handover or maybe train their replacement, and they can do that as a visitor. But when you're entering and the authorities see that you've been here for 2 years on a work visa, you're continuing to come in thereafter as a visitor. They won't always put 2 and 2 together and see that as a logical set of circumstances. They may think that you are continuing to work. There's this wider circumstances that paint a picture of what you are doing. It's not the facts of what you're doing. It's what may be perceived as what you're doing that you need to consider. And I've included family there as well. If you're coming in on a business trip with all of your family, and you're taking them out of school for a significant period of time, again, it paints the picture of, well, is that actually a business trip, or are they coming in for a bit longer? And the final point I wanted to raise is consider the importance, and perhaps importance isn't the right word here, but the strategic nature of this trip to your organization. If this is a one-off meeting, it's for 2 days, and actually it could be done remotely, but it's nice to do it in person, then fine. Perhaps it's a risk worth taking, but you're comfortable that if that person is turned away at the border, it's not going to be detrimental to your business. I'll go back to the South African example that I had. If somebody's flying for 12 hours, they're a partner in a law firm, they are negotiating a very important deal. Do you really want to take the risk of that person being refused entry, or do you want to secure them a visa that would ensure that they can enter? And there are visas that can do that. So yeah, it's about I would best summarize it as consider the situation holistically. Don't just look at the 90 days or the 180, and don't just look at exactly what they're doing. It's the wider situation to consider.
Yes, definitely the big picture. How could LinkedIn Energy build into their processes and policies the impact of ETIAS to lower the risk of automatic bans or even entry fines?
Yes. So lots of things they can do. I can see a few questions popping up as well, but I think we'll come to those just after this slide, if that's okay, Fiona. So firstly, most of the clients we work with in the UK and Europe, there's often a single or a couple of gatekeepers. Normally it's HR, perhaps it's an independent global mobility team if it's a larger organization, or sometimes it sits with legal or even a COO for startups. Now, my advice is to get the engagement and the buy-in of the teams that are traveling frequently. They need to take on accountability for their actions, because sometimes it's very hard to monitor what they're doing. People book trips last minute. You won't see every single entry and exit, perhaps, unless you've got a very robust travel desk. Now, if you can train managers to understand the repercussions on the business if they are refused entry, if you can inform people that if they do go over those days and the digital border system, EES, is in place, they will not be permitted to come back in for that summer holiday with their family. And they will have a very disgruntled family sat at home in the rain in the UK. Then you'll get far more buy-in. So it's really not devolving responsibility, but it's spreading it across the business. And I think that engagement is really important, something that we've worked hard with our clients to do. Monitoring is an obvious one. Many businesses will already do this for visas. It's a legal requirement in the UK that you set reminders at 30, 60, and 90 days before expiry. Do the same thing for people's time spent in the UK or Europe. Monitor it, set reminders, so you're not scrabbling to get somebody a work visa when they're at 89 days. You can see that threshold approaching, and you can put plans in place sooner rather than later. Use those tools. There's many of them. We've linked to one, but there's lots and lots of them online. Awareness. Somebody actually raised a question, which I'll answer as part of this, but you can get visas and work permits to allow for people who are entering for what could be viewed as business purposes, but perhaps you just want to guarantee that. In the UK, it was previously called the Intercompany Transfer Visa. It's now called Global Business Mobility and Senior Specialist Worker. They allow for what's known as multiple entry visits to the UK. So you get a work visa. You might be based in the Netherlands, but it will allow you to come into the UK weekly, every couple of days, monthly, however often you need, used heavily by the IT sector. And it secures your entry. It doesn't guarantee it, but it makes it far more likely that you won't be far more unlikely that you won't be turned away. So lots of things you can do to mitigate risk. And finally, I think it's important for businesses not to be blinkered to the potential impacts of exceeding thresholds, of being found to be working in a jurisdiction for which they do not have valid permission. And they should acknowledge those risks. And I think by acknowledging them, it makes it far easier to implement the engagement bit and the monitoring piece. If you can turn around to the business and say, well, actually, if somebody's in the UK on a visit as a visitor with an ETA and they're found to be working, we face £60,000 in fines per person. We face publication on the government website. You can go and read the list of companies that's published. And finally, we face losing our license to sponsor other work visas in the UK, which perhaps you've got the CEO on a work visa in the UK. So acknowledging that makes it far easier to then go out to your teams and say, look, we need you to be on the ball, because if you're not, these are the repercussions that we face as a business. I would say that the introduction of EES really heightens that as well, because it will trigger these more automatically.
Thank you. I mean, the same, I know, and I'm just sharing it with everybody, exactly the same applies in Europe, and each country has its own rules, but it's fines, debarring, exclusion of any further markets for the company. And in a lot of countries, it is a shared liability between the client, where the employee is going to work, and the employer. So it's the same. I think we've got a little bit of time to try and take some questions before we have to leave. But I would like to say thank you very much. So we've got a question from Sonda. What happens if someone is combining work and holidays, holiday post-work trip?
That's fine. They as long as the activities for both purposes, business and personal, are permitted in whichever jurisdiction they're traveling to, that they can do so. What you cannot do is, so we've talked very heavily here about ETA and ETIAS, and those are for individuals like Brits going into Europe or like Europeans coming into the UK that do not require a visa for entry. For nationals that do require a visa for entry, like, for example, Chinese nationals, you cannot apply for a visit visa to say that you're coming to visit your family and then turn around and actually come in and do business. You can change your plans, but you can't proactively deceive in order to get the visa to then do something else that you hadn't originally declared. So to answer your question, yes, you can come in and do activities that cross both boundaries, but if you're applying for a visa, you shouldn't state something that you're not intending to do just purely for the purposes of acquiring the visa.
And I'm just going to throw in one more question. The other questions we will, of course, be answering everybody by email, and we will be sharing the slides and a recording as well. But this is an interesting one. A dual national, UK and EU national, who entered France with their EU passport, but when they return to the UK, do they need to get an ETA, or because they've got a British passport, they don't?
They don't. I can speak from personal experience there as well. They don't. So yeah, you can enter, a British national cannot be placed under any sort of immigration control or forced to apply for any document like that. So as long as you can show up at the border and flash your British passport, and you won't be forced to apply for an ETA, even though you left to go into Europe on your European passport.
Well, thank you very much, Valerie, Alistair, Kassem, I hope that everybody found this interesting. Catherine, I'll let you close the event.